And one of the major problems you solve is the frequency problem on the grid. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure.
What is the frequency problem? What creates that, and how do you manage that?
Yeah, Karim, I think we can both agree that the world is a lot better off with more clean energy sources than not. More clean energy, less pollution. And so, um, there are some fundamental issues that we have when we try to deploy renewable generation at large scale, particularly uh, when there's already a high population of renewable generators in a certain section of the utility grid. Thinking about it that way. The best example I could give you in recent years is Hawaii. They've really
Exactly.
struggled with growing the amount of renewable penetration on their grids while still not creating a debalance or a destabilization
Yeah,
of
yeah.
the network
What's
there.
Hawaii at? I remember it being at 35, 40% penetration a few years ago. It's probably gone past 50 plus now, is what I'm assuming. And that was also creating such other dynamics
Right.
where all the wealthier folks who could afford it were going almost off grid because they could, I mean, because electricity is so expensive there, 50 plus
Sure.
cents, like it made like you got a 3 year payback putting your own solar, own battery, cutting yourself off the grid. And that created less customers for the grid, but fixed costs. And it was a crazy story. That first time I heard it was probably 5, 6 years ago. I
Yeah.
Can you give us
Yeah.
an update of like how things have evolved since then, and like
Well, yeah,
what's
what you're describing a little bit is the as grid defection, where people basically
I
say, I'm done with being connected to the utility grid. I'm going to be my own power station, and
yeah,
they connect solar and batteries and maybe other generation sources like micro hydro or wind, and basically operate their own self-contained
yeah,
microgrid. And yeah, it's actually that kind of segues into some of the technology that we'll be talking about here. Is
yeah,
is that grid forming technology? Because when you're not connected to a power
right,
line, you are your own source of the AC waveform. It's
yeah,
so grid. That's really the kind of the fundamental roots and background for this grid forming technology that we're talking about. Is it comes from the off grid space, because yeah, you're generating the sine wave. You're not like latching onto it and syncing with it as grid following inverters typically would do. You really are the source of that waveform, and that's really that grid forming technology that has now evolved to a place where it's creating stabilization. It's leaving the electric grid in a better condition than it found it. That's how I like just to think about it, and is solving some of the fundamental problems we have with deploying large volumes of renewables on the grid. So yeah, the example you used earlier, I remember when I first got into the industry 17 so years ago. Yeah, I heard these sort of theoretical limits about how much renewable penetration we could realistically achieve, and it was on the order of 25%, and then I think it kind of crept up to 30%, maybe 35 over time. But I think it's always been a talking point in our industry, is that renewables are intermittent. They don't behave like 20th century generators and fossil fuel generators, and they create some stability problems. It's definitely been a political talking point. And
yeah.
yeah, that's really what I'm here today to talk about, is sort of debunk some of those myths, create a little bit
Nice.
more awareness and education on
Yeah,
that in
that's
that area. Yeah.